Hello everybody, AJ Soccer here from newmontgaming.com, and today we're going to run through the top 8 of Pro Tour Kaladesh up to the finals, at which point I recommend that you watch the actual finals in their entirety. I know it's long, but the games are awesome and there's a lot of teachable moments, so check them out. But for this video, I like the idea of doing these compressed replays, and I've wanted to do them for a while now, and the best way to learn how to do something is to do it, so enjoy. Starting with Pro Tour Kaladesh, there have been some changes to the way the seedings and bracket work for top 8. For the 3 and 4 seeds, nothing really changes, but the 5 through 8 seeds now have to play an additional match, while the 1 and 2 seeds get a free pass into the semifinals. Our top 8 kicks off with Ben Hull piloting red-white vehicles in his Pro Tour debut, and Li Chan in his 5th top 8 in as many years with the Mardu variation. Ben has a slight step up, having started on the play against Lee's mulligan, but the early skirmishes of trades, loots, and removal leave the board fairly even. Ben's selfless spirits end up giving him Smuggler's Copter advantage, which allows him better card selection as well as the evasion necessary to pressure Lee's Gideons. Realizing that both the skies and the long game belong to Ben, Lee starts sending his ground pounders across to try and close out the game quickly. Ben chumps with Inspector and has Harness Lightning for Lee's last copter, which was trying to protect Gideon. He cracks another clue and chumps again, while Lee can only play a doomed Gideon to make a 2-2 and gain some life. Lee does have a life advantage and the biggest creature on the battlefield, but is losing traction in the game quickly. Lee digs with clues while his caravan is blocked and then finished off in the end step, and Ben continues to tear Lee's board apart with a declaration in stone, taking out both knights without a trace. Sky Sovereign console flagship comes down to seal the deal. Thopter gets in the copter, which somehow flies the battlecruiser, and Li Chan packs in game 1. Mao up a game with Jeskai control against Joey Manor with blue-white flash. Efficient removal over the inefficient beaters of Reflector Mage, but Carlos misses his 4th land drop and Joey's sorcery speeds in Archangel Avacyn. Anticipate for a land drop and Carlos has to beat Avacyn and Westvale Abbey. A natural 5th land and Glimmer of Genius into a 6th sets up Gearhulk for Harness to take down Avacyn, but Joey makes an Abbey token and Carlos lets him untap. A Selfless Spirit from Joey prompts the Gearhulk anyway, but now the Harness gets spell quellered and Joey sends for 5 plus 3 from Avacyn's trigger as Hulk eats a token. The Avacyn flips, and in response to Purification, Joey Selfless Spirits to save his team, but in response to that, another Harness Lightning from Carlos takes out the Avacyn, which is actually a blunder, as he could have taken out the Queller for free and used that Harness Lightning to finish off the Avacyn, but now Dovin Bond has to hold off the Queller, meaning Hulk has to stay on defense for the lethal 1/1 token. This mistake leaves Joey with 6 outs to lethal, plus 4 redraws, but it's a land off the top and Carlos is stabilized and has little trouble turning the corner to go up 2-0. Ben Hull took the other pre-board game and Lee starts post-board play with Toolcraft Exemplar into Scrap Heap Scrounger, which Ben has to harness, but more pressure follows. A Smuggler's Copter on defense is not what you want, but a Disintegrated one is even worse, and Lee takes game 3. Back to Ramau vs. Manor, a Naked Queller gets Immolated Glared, and Gideon gets quarantined after making a 2-2. Endstep Avacyn and Carlos takes the opportunity to Glimmer, keeping a Harness and an as of yet uncastable Torrential Gearhulk on top. Manor's Knight enters the minivan, and Carlos goes after Avacyn with Harness Lightning. Spell Queller comes down, and rather than let it resolve and then chain lightnings, Carlos simply points another one at the Avacyn and lets the Queller hold on to his removal spell for a bit. Radiant Flames resets the board, and Avacyn comes back down at sorcery speed to drive the minivan. Gearhulk for Harness on Avacyn leaves Manor with 3 copters and no pilots. After stasis snaring the Hulk, he peels Westvale Abbey, aka the DMV, and drivers start jumping into minivans and finish Carlos off. Ben Hull on the play for game 4, the early skirmishes leave him well ahead, capitalized by Gideon, and there's no way for Lee to catch up, and he is eliminated. Carlos on the play for his game 4, Joey mulligans and keeps a 1-lander on the draw and misses. Thribbin Inspector runs into an elephant hiding behind a tree, one more miss, but then a Plains lets a Selfless Spirit come down, but Carlos is already on Glimmer of Genius. It's not all doom and gloom, as Immolated Glare on the Selfless Spirit gets fizzled by Rattle Chains, and Carlos has the Blessed Alliance to take out the 2-1. Linvala comes down as just a 5/5 body, and Joey has Stasis Snare, but misses the 3rd land yet again, and with Counter Magic up, the writing is on the wall, and Carlos advances. Stage 2 of the quarterfinals sees Matt Nass in his long overdue first top 8 with Teamer Aetherworks Marvel in what has to be a nightmare matchup against Carlos Ramau's counter-heavy Jeskai control deck. Glassblower's Puzzle Knot and Vessel of Nascency followed by Glint Nest Crane and Contingency Plan as Matt tries to develop while Carlos sits on Void Shatter and Summary Dismissal. Matt left an Aether Hub on top, which is curious, but with Puzzle Knot he wants to get to 6 energy as well as hit land drops towards casting his Emrakul. The first Crane missed and the second only found a Woodweaver's Puzzle Knot, and both get cleaned up by Radiant Flame Flames. Matt draws a Marvel, but sits knowing it's not likely to resolve right now, looking to use Emrakul first to potentially clear the way, but Carlos has one of his 2 summary dismissals, followed up by Void Shatter on the Marvel. Matt found another Emrakul, but Torrential Gearhulk on the dismissal, leaving Matt hellbent and on a clock. Upkeep Crack Glass Blower finds Marvel, but another Hulk for Void Shatter, and Matt is dead in 2 attacks. On the other side of the bracket, Ben Hull's red-white vehicles are up a game over PT Theros finalist Pierre Dejean's blue-red spells deck based around Dynavolt Tower, which comes down on turn 3 while Depala jumps in the chopper before getting hit by lightning. The Thraben and Spectre twins come down and Pierre goes max velocity with Tormenting Voice pitching the first take inventory, then casting the second, getting up to 6 energy to threaten the copter. But Veteran Motorist means it can't quite take it down, and another loot turns a dead Declaration in Stone into a flag-bearing Selfless Spirit, which is then electrocuted. Take inventory number 3 brings Pierre up to 8 cards, and skips a land drop in order to Madness, Fiery Temper, and Cleanup to take down the Motorist and getting back to 5 energy. Ben goes with Developmental Gideon rather than trying to protect Copter with either an Emblem or Depala. The Knight gets in the chopper just long enough for it to be Dynavolted, and the Inspectors peck him to a convenient 5. With a grip full of cards, but behind that self-inflicted land drop, there's no answer to Gideon plussing and sending, and Hull goes up 2-0. Back to Nass and Ramau, attune into plan for Hub, then Glassblowers bottoming both, then cracking it and bottoming 2 more for Matt. From the play, a turn 4 Marvel would dodge 2 of Carlos's 5 counters, but no such luck, and Summary Dismissal comes online. All Matt can offer is a Woodweavers and end step a Kozilek's return to get an instant in his yard. Torrential Gearhulk for Anticipate starts the clock and finds a Void Shatter, but Aether Meltdown cuts that clock, and yet more Woodweaving will tread water but not accomplish much. Crane misses, and Carlos deploys Avacyn and kills the Crane. Matt close to casting Emrakul, but Dismissal waiting. Carlos starts chaining card draw to pull further and further ahead. Crane finds Marvel, which is shattered, and Glimmer into Gearhulk all but closes the door. Lightning on my own Gearhulk to flip Avacyn, Matt finally casts his first Emrakul, which is summarily dismissed, and Gearhulk for the second also brings lethal, and Carlos is up 2-0. Post-board, Dejean gets access to more control elements including Thing in the Ice and potentially his tournament MVP Nibblest of Frost. On the other side, Hull gets 2 Fragmentize and some upward maneuverability with Planeswalkers if he wants to grind. Pierre on 6 harnesses an Exemplar, and Motorist finds a Sky Sovereign that I'm a little surprised wasn't boarded out, but looks fine in his land-heavy draw, as Pierre lays down a tower and Hull answers with Pia Nalar. No 4th land for Dejean, and his sideboard tech Thing in the Ice is declared in stone, and an attack for 7. Another missed land drop really choking Pierre's hand. He uses Harness and Tower to cut down Hull's board to just a Thopter, as a rather ineffective Sky Sovereign comes down. Pierre bricks his 4th land yet again, even after cycling Take Inventory. Hull doesn't find a crew member, but fragmentizes the tower as a good consolation prize. A 4th land and another Thing in the Ice, looking like too little too late as Hull finds Exemplar, which triggers just in time to pilot the battlecruiser, dropping Pierre to 1. And once again the Thing is turned to stone before it can get out of the ice, and Pierre has to answer both creatures and hope Ben breaks. Tormenting Voice Madnessing Fiery Temper is partway there, but needing either a 1-mana removal spell or an untapped land and a 2-mana removal spell, he misses and Ben Hull advances 3-0 to the relief of Shota Ahsoka. With his back against the wall, Matt Nass gets access to a good amount of counter magic and can replace some air with Glimmer of Genius, but Carlos gets access to a huge amount of counter magic of his own and gets to cut all of his super dead cards. The first few turns see Carlos playing lands while Matt curves out with a bunch of energy and selection, with Attune, Glassblowers, Crack It, Glimmer, both splitting. Sculpting a beautiful hand, Matt plays Marvel with double Dispel backup, but Carlos has Spell Queller to break his heart and back. Crane misses but can hold off the Queller beats, Attune before Contingency Plan which bins 5, and we go to Plan C, which keeps yet another Contingency Plan while milling an Emrakul, and Avacyn hits the battlefield on end step to start the clock. Plan D finds a Marvel while Stasis Snare on a Crane turns a 5-turn clock into a 3-turn clock. More importantly, while Nass has 2 Dispels for Ramau's Negate and Void Shatter, another Spell Queller rolls off the top just in time. The sequence goes Marvel, Negate, Dispel, Spell Queller, crucially on the Marvel and not the Dispel. Matt falls to 2 on the attack and comes up empty, falling in 3. The semifinals start with the number 1 seed, Makis Matsoukas, who you might have guessed from his name is Greek, but might not have guessed is playing in his first ever Pro Tour. He faces off with a token-oriented take on red-white aggro against former world champion Carlos Ramau and his Jeskai control deck. The token's angle of going wide leaves you better against spot removal, but weaker against sweepers. From the play, Matsoukas has 4 creatures in play by turn 3, but Ramau's draw has Smooth Mana and 2 Radiant Flames, a key card in this favorable matchup. Bushwhacker in Goblin Chariot mode, followed up by Servo Exhibition, and Carlos Glimmers end step into another Radiant Flames, and Anticipate while Makis only manages a driverless Copter. Three-Man Inspector, one of the better draws, but the copter gets harnessed and Carlos's hand is 2 Gear Hulks, a Summer Dismissal, and the 3rd Radiant Flames, and it's all over but the crying. Hulk a Glimmer into Hulk a Glimmer, a conservative block to play around Outnumber, and Matsukis packs it in a turn later. Game 2, Matsukis curves Inspector into Inspector and Copter, while Carlos has Harness for the first off of his mulligan, another Harness for the second, and Matsukis is left cracking clues. The key Radiant Flames cleans up the board, and all Matsukis can do is activate Needle Spires and get in, dropping Ramau to a still very healthy 13 life. Main phase Glimmer to hit a land drop, he finds 2, setting up Gear Hulk for turn 6. Spires gets in again, but on the 3rd attack, Gear Hulk for Glimmer gets in the way, and this game is just over. Or is it? Carlos gets a little loosey-goosey with his 2nd Gear Hulk and gets them both wrapped up in a Declaration in Stone. Another creature in Inspector, which comes in with an artifact for Exemplar, and Bushwhacker represents Exaxes. Carlos has to anticipate into a 2-mana removal spell, and does. In fact, all 3 cards do it. Though it's actually not totally necessary, since despite what the booth thought, it's actually only 8 damage, but for the sake of drama, we'll pretend it was lethal. Instead of Fumigate, Dovin Bond shrinks the Bushwhacker with Summary Dismissal up to prevent additional Bushwhacker shenanigans. He does draw a Bushwhacker, but his clue finds a land, and all he can do is poke for 1. Endstep Glimmer keeps both and Fumigate is cast. Outnumber stops 1 of the life gain, but Carlos has a Planeswalker, plenty of life, and a grip full of spells. Down 0-2, Marcus goes into the post-board games on the play and Carlos mulligans. A little mana efficient for the first 2, turn 3 is a PNLR and an attack for 3, and Carlos doesn't have removal or Radiant Flames and has to settle for Spell Queller Ambush, which is thwarted by Stasis Snare. Dovinbond shrinks Exemplar and Marcus takes the time to kill him and deploys Servo Exhibition, and Carlos doesn't have the Fumigate but represents Avacyn, which Pia falters with a Servo, and still no Wraths means Marcus takes game 3. Carlos finally on the play, Inventor's Apprentice into Smuggler's Copter but no more red mana. Servos come down but don't crew Copter for fear of letting Carlos use his mana to kill it. So instead Spell Queller comes down to bounce off of the Apprentice. A 3rd land and permanent red source off the top for Marcus, and now a Servo gets in the Copter, and the loot goes off discarding Pia. Immolating Glare is met with Make a Stand, which leaves Queller with no good blocks, and Carlos falls to 11, with an end step Anticipate but still misses his 5th land drop. Sitting on Radiant Flames, but wants to take down the Chopper first, as well as milk more value with his Spell Queller. Exemplar comes down, followed by Bushwhacker, but not before a Servo gets in the Chopper, which is harnessed down. Queller jumps in front of the Exemplar, and the way is clear for a clean Radiant Flames. Matsukis needs a big follow-up, but with 3 removal spells and an uncastable Gideon, he can only pass back. As if to rub it in, Carlos has his own Gideon, and its Knight gets harnessed, then an untapped 4th land off the top means Gideon can come down, but the second Gideon to the party is rarely the survivor. Radiant Flames for the Knight, Gideon beats Shadow Gideon, and Marcus has just a naked Copter. Land go both ways, and Gear Hulk is online. Gideon is chugging away, and Carlos has removal to spare. The removal spells that have been rotting in Marcus's hands now have targets, but the position is already lost. PNLR's Thopter drives the Chopper into Gear Hulk's Glare, and Gideon makes an emblem to get his Knights above the Radiant Flames for 2, while Harness Lightning finishes 1 off, and Marcus takes 6. The emblem and Wandering Fumarole means that the next attack is lethal through Stasis Snare, and Carlos is on to the finals. The other semifinals is Hall of Famer and 7th ranked player in the world Shota Yasoka with Grixis Control against first-timer Ben Hull with straight-up red-white vehicles. Inspector is almost frozen by Thing in the Ice but is declared in stone immediately. Selfless Spirit plus another Inspector on 3 is met with Cracking a Clue and Bombardment on the flyer. Both players continue to be mana efficient with Selfless Spirit and Smuggler's Copter versus Glimmer of Genius on 4. Shota untaps and kills the Selfless Spirit. DePaula jumps in the Chopper and whiffs her trigger. Unlicensed Disintegration means it's only the Inspectors again. DePaula harnessed, Hull starts by cracking a clue, attacking for 2, and playing another Spirit which also gets harnessed. Inspector Brigade gets in there and Wandering Fumarole is animated to block, lowering the shields of Void Shatter and letting Pia resolve. Another land for Shota and Ben with 3 spells in hand, 4 creatures, and a clue in play. Fumarole bounces off Pia and Bombardment on the Thopter after a pump. Shota just takes 2 and post-combat Copter gets shattered and Shota is hellbent. Fumarole gets in Pia's way and the hardest working Inspectors in the game drop Shota to 7. DePaula is Void Shattered, but Exemplar resolves with that clue still hanging around to pump it. Shota simply draws and passes back. Fumarole saving 3 instead of 2 now, he falls to 3 life. Post-combat, the clue is cracked and a lethal Thopter means Radiant Flames is no longer the clean out it would have been at any other point this game, and Shota can't find an answer and drops game 1. Ben starts game 2 with 5 cards and is forced to Declaration in Stone a thing in the ice only to see it replaced. Shota's opener was Mana Light, but some lands off the top means smooth development, while Transgress hits DePaula and a couple Inspectors come down to try and dig Ben out of his double mulligan. Shota so far ahead he chooses not to cash in his Radiant Flames for 4 creatures, instead end-stepping a Glimmer after Copter comes down. Radiant Flame cleans up the creatures and puts Thing in the Ice down to 1. Exemplar comes down and crews the vehicle, but before attackers anticipate, flips Thing in the Ice to Awoken Horror and the 3-turn clock is on. Harness the Copter after activation, negate another Copter, and the chump blocking begins. Shota takes game 2, and we go to sideboards, where Shota gets 3 Weaver of Lightnings and another Radiant Flames, while Ben gets a Chandra and a pair of Gideons. Shota mulligans a double island, double anticipate hand on the draw for being too slow. Ben also goes to 6 and kicks off the game with a Copter off of 2 planes, while Shota lays down a Thing in the Ice. No red nor third land leaves Copter pilotless, as all he can do is Declaration the Thing. Weaver of Lightning on 3, Exemplar lets Copter loot, but only finds another planes and is blocked by Weaver, followed by another Copter. On end step, Shota cracks a clue and finds Anticipate, but as it is the end step, the Exemplar is 3-2, so the Weaver can't take it down. Another Thing in the Ice, and Ben runs Copter into Weaver to loot into a red source, but it's an Inspired Vantage, which ETB's tapped. DePaula comes down in a response to Exemplar trigger, harness the 3-3 and Weaver the 1-1. With their dying breath, they activate the Copters, DePaula even hitting an Exemplar. 2 loots and 3 damage later, Needle Spires ends Ben's turn. Shota picks up Unlicensed Disintegration to go with his Radiant Flames and negate. DePaula and Motorist come down and crew up. Disintegration the 3-3, Weavering the now 3-1. Weaver blocks the now 3-3 Copter, and the 4-4 Copter gets in. Without things to do with his mana, Shota bashes with Wandering Fumarole and holds up Negate or Bombardment. Another Motorist crews up a Copter for a loot and 4 damage, and a post-combat Gideon gets the full treatment as it's negated with Weaver taking down the Motorist and Thing in the Ice down to a single counter. Bombardment to flip Thing and Fumarole activation puts Ben down to 5. Spires crews a Copter to chump and Hull falls to 1 and can't come up with enough to survive another attack. Advantage Japan. Ben mulls to 5 yet again and is forced to keep a 1-lander and forced to top a planes to play a Copter on 2 with a hand of DePaula, Gideon, and Fleet Wheel Cruiser. Thing in the Ice for Shota, and Ben draws just about the worst possible in the form of his other Fleet Wheel Cruiser followed by Sky Sovereign. A 3rd land in red source finally arrives, but it starts tapped and Shota is already casting Glimmer. A 2nd Thing in the Ice, then Gideon, but in response to the Knight, to the slaughter takes down the Planeswalker. Knight flies Chopper for first blood, but is taken down by Radiant Flames and the Horrors are about to be awoken with Negate backup. DePaula pilots the Copter and whiffs her trigger for 2, and before the loot can happen, a Bombardment flips the Thing in the Ice and bounces both. Attack for 7, negate Copter to flip the other, and remove the fresh Notarist, and that's lethal. And so the finals are set. Like I said up top, I think you should watch the match for yourself, though I could possibly be talked into going over it in some capacity. In the meantime, let me know what you thought of this video, and make sure you're checking out all the stuff we're rolling out over at newmontgaming.com, and I'll see you next time.